back to Fire Princess Reviews. I'm Fire Princess Silly, here to talk to you about comics, cartoons, and other awesome nerd things. So, what are we talking about today on the main video this week? We're talking about SSSS.Gridman, the new anime from Studio Trigger. We're going to give a very basic overview of the series. We're going to talk about some plot points, so if you actually haven't watched the series yet, even though I suggested it to you in an earlier video this year, like 4 videos ago, some time ago, you should really look into it. You should really be checking it out. As always, these are going to be my opinions, but if you haven't watched it, spoilers. It's going to be spoilers, so just deal with it. Like, boom, you're here, you agreed to this, boom, you've been warned. So let's talk about this. So, SSSS.Gridman is actually based on the 1993 through 94 Tokusatsu series, Gridman Hyper Agent. Whew, that was like a mouthful. The 4 S's in SSSS.Gridman stands for Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. That's cyber with an S, so it works, I suppose. It's, as mentioned, it's done by Studio Trigger, and so of course you can expect the animation to be top-notch and superb. I don't know if it's going to have a trigger turn or a Gainax ending, as sometimes that studio is known to kind of do those things, but we'll see. It's early in the season, so what are you going to do? The story focuses on our main character, Yuta. Yuta just wakes up in another character's home. Rika, she's also another one of our very predominant characters. Yuta wakes up in her house, and he doesn't know who he is, where he is, who she is, who he is. It's very interesting. He doesn't know his name, where he lives, who she is, what his life's about. And she's like, great, this is just great. I really hope that you're telling the truth, because if you're not, it's a real fucking shitty thing to do. So we don't know exactly what the relationship prior to this was, but I'm guessing it's more than meets the eye. Probably. They go to the hospital, they get him checked out. It really is amnesia, at least as far as anybody is concerned and can tell. So she's like, cool, go to your house now. And so he's like, I don't know where I live. So they call up his friend Sho. Sho is another very prominent character of the series. And so Sho tells them where he lives, where Yuta lives, and she walks you to his house, and basically Sho shows up the next morning to pick him up, take him to school. So that's the series. Well, while at school, and actually I believe outside the hospital, he notices big shadows in the distance, and we can clearly see them. They're the shadows of Kaiju, which only he can see. It's really cool, or weird. It's concerning, for certain. Certainly, it's definitely concerning. And so he doesn't know really what to do with that information until they go back to Rika's house later, and, well, weird. And he finds an old computer in Rika's shop. Rika's mother owns like a secondhand store / cafe, which is a really interesting business concept, I guess. Give that money. So, right, I say that a lot, I'm sorry. So, while there, old computer, and on that computer is a voice that only Yuta can hear, can see, a figure, a robot introducing himself as Gridman. He says that he needs Yuta because it's Yuta's duty to save the city. Like, yeah, Yuta has a purpose, and he needs to remember that purpose because lives are in danger. Well, shortly after that revelation, there's a kaiju attack. Like, it's basically, like, targeting the school, where Yuta goes to, and so he agrees to help Gridman in whatever way possible, and Gridman basically sucks him into the computer, and he becomes Gridman. He's able to, be Gridman. I don't know. Becomes a giant robot, and he fights the kaiju, and he wins, which is really neat. It's standard. It's like, it's a kaiju show. So, of course, the hero wins, boop, in the end of every episode. Yeah. Although it could change, as mentioned, it is a trigger show. So, sorry, popping things. So, they go to school the next day, and there's a lot of their class missing, because the thing was attacking the school, and nobody fucking remembers the people who are missing. Like, apparently, they died in the attack, and so when everything restarted the next day, all the roads were fixed, the school was fine, everything was totally cool, and nobody could remember these people that were missing because they died. So it turns out that if you die in a kaiju attack, even though everything's fine the very next day, the people who died just are forgotten. They're not remembered. They end up going to several of these students' houses because they want to talk to their parents, like, hey, what happened? Where wasn't so-and-so at school today? Why don't people remember? It turns out, they all died, a long time ago, way before that ever happened. And so basically their story gets rewritten, which is a really interesting concept, I think, to add to the whole thing. Because as we watch in Power Rangers or Sentai shows or kaiju shows in general, there's a lot of property damage, and then the next episode, everything's right as rain. Everybody doesn't talk about it. Everybody basically more or less forgets it. So that's kind of a good way to sort of explain it away. Is sure, that happened, and that happened for the main characters, but for everybody else, it didn't happen, and those who might have gotten caught up in that, well, they're not important to the story anyway, so they just don't exist anymore. Yeah. So, there's another kaiju attack. Only before that happens, Yuta notices that he is being stalked by somebody, and they eventually introduce themselves. Their name is Samurai Caliber. And they know all about Gridman, and they're ready to help. In fact, it's their job to help. And they fix up the old computer so that it runs better, and that means that Gridman himself runs better. It turns out that not only does Caliber know about Gridman and can help with the computer stuff, he in turn can also fuse with the computer and become a sword for Gridman. So he becomes Gridman Saber or whatever. It's neat, which is another weapon to have. It's about this time that we're actually introduced to the villain, well, we're sort of introduced already to the villain of the series, who's actually a classmate of Yuta, named Akane. And she's the prettiest girl at the school. Everybody is in love with her, that sort of thing. And yeah, but she is a total kaiju freak. She creates the kaiju and uses another sort of kaiju in her computer named Alexis to help bring these models to life. Her room is totally trashed out. There's bags everywhere. There's statues of kaiju everywhere too. She's a total shut-in on her own terms and still the school beauty queen out there. So that's also an interesting take, I think, on the pretty popular girl, is that she's also the villain and maybe isn't as clean as everybody would like to think that she is. Whew. So she is creating kaiju. She especially is creating kaiju to fight Gridman because he's a new part of the story. Apparently she's been creating kaiju for a while and using them against people, but now Yuta's there, Gridman's there, combating her, and she doesn't know who Gridman is. Well, she does, like I mentioned, the spoilers. She does figure it out later, but that's a later episode. It's actually the swimsuit episode, which kind of the swimsuit part gets cut a little short because of Kaiju attack. So there is fan service and there isn't fan service because Kaiju, I don't know. I don't know if they're ever going to do more fan service in this show. So I kind of hope not, but at the same time it is anime, and so you just kind of, you roll with it. So there's that. Whew. Sorry. We also meet more characters later. We meet Max, Boar, and Vit. They're all students, along with Caliber, at the Neon Genesis Junior High School, which I think is really, like, just the best name for a high school in a mech show or a kaiju show is Neon Genesis, because it's obviously a nod to Neon Genesis Evangelion, thank you, brain, which a lot of the people at Studio Trigger worked on. They originally came from the Gainax studio, so I think that's a neat little nod. So there's that. And basically, each one of these people can fuse with Junk, the computer, and become armor for Gridman. They all do try to fuse in at once. It's too much for the computer to handle. So I'm hoping they figure out how to do that, because apparently they're supposed to be able to do that. Also, Rika and Sho can see Gridman now too, since Caliber fixed up the computer. It's really interesting. So what do I like about this show? Let's get into that now, because we've kind of gone over the premise and the characters. So basically the premise is Yuta's an amnesiac with special powers in order to bond to Gridman in order to fight Kaiju. He fights these Kaiju, which have been created by Akane, another one of his classmates, and she is totally down to kill everyone, especially if they're rude. Like, it's really, I like her personality. It's very interesting, like flip of the switch sort of thing. It's neat. It's good because you wouldn't expect her to be the villain, which kind of works in her favor because nobody knows where the Kaiju come from. They come from her. Anyway, moving on. So what do I like about the show? Obviously, I like the art. The art style is really neat. It's really crisp. It's clean. Until you get to the Kaiju fights. The Kaiju fights are done with, I mean, the models look great. It's computer animation. The models look great, but the movements are slow and clunky, which is on purpose. It's intended because it's supposed to remind you of those old shows like Ultraman, where it'd be two people in costumes kind of fighting it out, and it's hard to move in those big foam suits. So that's why the movements are sort of clunky. They're supposed to be, to give you that nostalgic feeling of actually watching a kaiju show. So I think that's a really great thing. I think that's really fun. It's really a nod to older kaiju shows. It's definitely a good twist in a world where animation is seamless and quick and fast. It's interesting to slow down those fights and try to make it look like two guys in foam suits fighting. And I appreciate that. The models still look amazing and cool, so that's really the important part. There's also, like qualms that Yuta runs across in his line of work as Gridman. Like, he's worried about, because they don't know where the Kaiju come from, so he's worried about Kaiju becoming people, or people becoming Kaiju, and now he's killing people. So he does go through that. Like, so there's a lot of, and there's, of course, a will they, won't they between him and Rika, which, it's an anime, so there has to be some kind of a mini love story of sorts. It's also a Trigger anime, so they tend to do, like, minor love stories in their anime anyway, so it's not that big a deal. It's not even totally out of place, and it doesn't slow down any part of the show. It's just kind of frustrating, I would say, to watch Yuta bumble around Rika. Like, just fortify yourself and tell her your feelings. Damn. Let's, like, get it out of the way so we can continue, like, the more interesting parts, which are, of course, the Kaiju fights, and hopefully discovering that Kane is the one creating the kaiju in order to basically wreck the city and kill people that she doesn't like. So, yeah. Boom. That's SSSS.Gridman. What are we going to talk about in the main video next time? I don't know. Kidding. We're talking about Zombieland Saga, which is also another one of my favorite series this season. Lots of good anime focus. You know, we're going to get back into comics here real soon. But let's move on. Like, let's do it. Let's just, like, get into, like... Let's get into, like, some shows. Let's put some cartoons on this channel. Yeah. So, yep. Until next time... I mean, you know, look for that. But until next time, enjoy comics, enjoy cartoons, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!